Game night. The bowl of chips is out, the game is on, and you twist the lid off a jar of salsa and tip it into a dish. It slides out in one slow, glossy sheet. Not a spoonful of tomatoes and onions, but a smooth red pour, the same way pasta sauce leaves the jar. It pools and settles, looking less like something chopped than something poured. It always has. You've been buying that jar for years, calling it salsa. Tonight, one line of federal fine print explains that slow red pour in a single sentence. You didn't do anything wrong. The jar did exactly what it was built to do, which is to be pasta sauce that learned Spanish. We pulled salsa from 10 stores. Great value from Walmart, Ortega, Pace, Old El Paso, Trader Joe's, and more you keep in your own fridge door. Most of them are wearing a costume. And the first ingredient on the back of nearly every jar is the confession. The exact same reconstituted tomato base that fills a jar of marinara 2 shelves over. Also tonight, the budget Mexican brand everybody looks down on quietly posted one of the cleanest labels of the test, and still couldn't stay off this list. One jar starts with real diced tomatoes and still landed near the bottom. And the hardest fall belongs to the most authentic-sounding name in the aisle. A celebrity chef whose all-natural salsa cost his company almost $4 million. Quick one before we start. Type the salsa sitting in your kitchen right now, the brand, and the very first ingredient printed on the back, in the comments. By the end, you'll know whether you bought salsa or sauce in a sombrero. 4 terms are going to do the work tonight. Concentrate, the first ingredient rule, hot fill, and standard of identity. Learn them once, and the salsa aisle can never dress up in front of you again, because the front of the jar throws a party. The back files a report. We judged all 10 the same way. Ingredient lists, nutrition panels, federal records, court filings. Paper only, no guessing. Counting down, worst at the end. Number 10. First, the honest part, because this channel doesn't do panic. Nothing in this video is unsafe. Tomato concentrate is real tomato. A little added sugar won't hurt you, and cooking salsa in a jar is a normal, legal way to make it shelf-stable. Nobody here is poisoning anyone. The crime isn't danger. It's disguise. Most of these jars charge you salsa money and salsa feelings for a product built like the cheapest sauce in the store. The numbers ahead come from the brand's own labels, FDA regulations, a class action settlement, and federal tomato data. Every claim tonight has a receipt. One more thing before the countdown. For years, the story was simple. Salsa is the healthy dip, the fresh one, the guilt-free bowl of vegetables. Keep that story in mind and watch what the first ingredient does to it, because salsa was never a promise about what's inside. It's a word, and unlike almost every other tomato product in the store, nobody had to earn it. Number 10. Great value from Walmart. Start at the bottom, where nobody expects craftsmanship. This is the cheapest jar in the test, and you knew it would be industrial. What matters is how. Flip the Walmart jar, and the first ingredient isn't tomatoes. It's crushed tomatoes, water, concentrated crushed tomatoes. That parenthesis is your first term. Concentrate is tomato paste. Tomatoes boiled down until the water's gone, cheap to ship, easy to store for a year in a drum. To make it pourable again, the factory adds the water back. So, concentrated crushed tomatoes, water, isn't a description of a garden. It's a recipe for rehydrating a commodity. The exact same move a jar of pasta sauce makes. 2 products, 2 aisles, 1 base. To be fair to Walmart, there's no added sugar here, and it isn't pretending to be fresh. Great value opens the countdown instead of ending it because it lies the least about what it is. This is the shallow end. The water gets deeper the more the label starts to brag. Because the next jar wears a Mexican name and charges you for the accent, while pouring from the very same base. Number 9. Ortega. Ortega has sold the taste of Mexico for over a century, so turn the jar and read what that taste is built from. First ingredient, word for word, tomato puree, water, tomato paste. Set that list next to a jar of spaghetti sauce and you couldn't tell them apart. Same puree, same water, same paste. Then, on top of that base, a line most people skate right past, natural flavor. Here's what that phrase quietly admits. If the tomatoes were fresh and the peppers were real, you wouldn't need a flavor added back in. Natural flavor is what you reach for when the ingredients underneath have been boiled and stored until they stop tasting like themselves. It's a quiet confession that the flavor didn't survive the process. Ortega isn't a scandal. It's a template, a Spanish name, a concentrate base, and a flavor packet standing in for freshness. Almost everything above it is a variation on this exact costume. All that changes is how much they charge you to believe the name. Which raises the obvious question. How do you see through it in 2 seconds without a lab? That's the next jar's whole lesson. Number 8. Pace. Pace is the one that taught America the word picante, and its own commercials made the rule you need. New York City? The whole joke was that real salsa comes from the right place, made the right way. So hold Pace to its own standard. First ingredient, crushed tomatoes, water, crushed tomato concentrate. Made, it turns out, from the same concentrate as everyone else. Here's your second term, the most powerful thing you'll learn tonight, the first ingredient rule. By law, every ingredient list is printed in order of weight, so the very first thing named is the biggest thing in the jar. You don't read the whole label. You read the first 2 words. If they're tomato puree or crushed tomato concentrate followed by water, the biggest thing in your salsa is rebuilt paste. You're holding sauce. If the first word is tomatoes, diced tomatoes, or tomatillos, you're closer to real. 1 glance, 2 words. Credit where it's due. Pace adds no sugar. Its panel says added sugars, 0 grams. But 0 sugar doesn't make concentrate fresh. Pace passes the sugar test and fails the first ingredient rule. Exactly the split the next jar erases, because it fails both at once. Number 7. Old El Paso. Old El Paso runs the taco aisle, so you trust it to know Mexican food. Read the jar. First ingredient, tomato puree, water, tomato paste. The base you now recognize on sight. But scan down the list, past the peppers, and there it is, printed plainly, sugar. That's the tell that separates this jar from the 2 before it. Great Value and Ortega sold you concentrate. Old El Paso sold you concentrate and then sweetened it. Why would a salsa need sugar at all? Fresh tomatoes and peppers are already bright on their own. You add sugar when the base is concentrate, cooked flat, and you're painting the brightness back on. The same reason cheap pasta sauce reaches for it. The sweetness you taste and call mild isn't the tomato being ripe. It's a spoonful of the thing you'd never knowingly pour on a vegetable. Small enough per serving to never chase, repeated across every taco night until small is the whole point. And now that you can spot concentrate and spot sugar, the next jar hands you the third piece. The reason all of this tastes cooked in the first place. And it does it while wearing a restaurant's name. Number 6. On the Border. Named for the restaurant chain, sold on the feeling of a basket of chips and a bowl of fresh salsa arriving at your table. So read the actual ingredients. Tomatoes, onions, water, tomato paste, jalapeno, sugar, salt. Real tomatoes first. Good. But by the 4th ingredient, you're back in paste, and by the 6th, you're in sugar. Water, paste, and sugar, stacked 3 deep in a jar selling you a restaurant. Here's your third term, and it explains the whole restaurant illusion, hot fill. Shelf-stable salsa is cooked, heated hot enough to sterilize it, then poured boiling into the jar and sealed. That's why it can sit on a warm shelf for a year, and why it pours in that smooth sheet instead of sitting up in chunks. Cooked once already, exactly like pasta sauce. Fresh salsa, the kind that actually tastes like a restaurant, is never cooked. It lives in the refrigerated aisle and lasts a week, because nothing killed it. So the cruel joke of On the Border is the promise on the front. The restaurant feeling you're paying for is the one thing a cooked, sweetened, paste-based jar on a warm shelf can never deliver. Hold that thought. The next jar finally breaks the pattern, and not the way you'd expect. Number 5. La Victoria. Here's the surprise of the night. La Victoria is the budget brand, the one you'd grab last, the one nobody brags about buying. And its label is cleaner than half the fancy jars still coming. First 3 ingredients: tomatoes, onions, green jalapeno peppers. Real produce, named in order, no concentrate up front, no sugar anywhere. On those first 2 words alone, La Victoria just beat brands that cost twice as much. So why is it still on this list? Because cleaner than the fancy ones is not the same as clean, and the paper won't let it off. Read further down and tomato puree still shows up. The concentrate didn't disappear, it just moved to the middle of the line instead of the front. There's calcium chloride and xanthan gum, two quiet tools that exist to make a cooked, stored product behave like a fresh one. And it's still hot fill, still cooked in the jar, still on a warm shelf. La Victoria is the best-dressed jar in the costume shop. A much lighter disguise, still a disguise. That's the honest place for it. A genuine step up, still on the failing side because the base and the process are the same story, told more quietly. And from here up, the jars stop getting more honest. They get more expensive and better at hiding. Which brings us to the brand that puts chunky and real right on the front and got its avocado cousin pulled off shelves. Number 4, Tostitos. Tostitos owns your chip bowl, so the salsa rides in on the same trust. The word on the jar is chunky, doing a lot of work, because chunks are what fresh salsa has and cooked concentrate doesn't. Turn it over. Tomato puree, water, tomato paste. The chunks are real, floated in a body that's once again rebuilt paste and water. A handful of diced tomatoes suspended in the same base as everything below it, sold on the one word that stops you reading the rest. And there's paper on the parent company. In 2023, Frito-Lay pulled its Tostitos avocado salsa dip off shelves in a recall. The jars were mislabeled, carrying undeclared milk, a real allergen risk for anyone who trusted the front. Different product from the chunky jar in your cart. Same lesson from the FDA. The front and the truth are two separate documents, and only one is regulated. That's 4 jars deep, and you've heard tomato puree, water, tomato paste so many times it's starting to sound like a chant. The top 3 all say it too. They just dress it in something you're even more sure you can trust. Number 3 hides it behind a good deed. Number 2 behind a foreign word. Number 1 behind a famous face. Number 3, Newman's Own. This is the jar you buy to feel good. Paul Newman's face. The promise that all the profit goes to charity. You're not just buying salsa, you're doing a small kindness. So who checks the label on a good deed? Let's check it. And credit first. The very first ingredient is diced tomatoes in tomato juice. Real tomatoes, leading the list. For one line, this looks like the honest jar. Then the second ingredient lands, tomato puree. Water and paste again. The real tomatoes were the opening act. The body of the jar is the same concentrate base as everything else. And it doesn't stop there. Keep reading and you hit sugar, and then natural flavor. That's the full costume in one label. Real tomatoes on top to pass your glance, concentrate underneath to fill the jar, sugar to brighten it, and natural flavor to fake the freshness the process cooked out. 3 tells stacked in one virtuous jar. None of that touches the charity, which is real and good. But the salsa is salsa in name only, and the halo does exactly what a halo does. It makes reading the back feel rude. That instinct, surely this one's fine, is worth more to a brand than any ingredient. Trust is the one thing they never have to list. Number 2, Trader Joe's Salsa Authentica. Read the name again. Authentica. Authentic. It's printed on the jar as a promise. The real thing, the salsa that doesn't play the games the big brands play. Now turn it around. The first ingredient, printed plain, tomato puree, water, and tomato paste. The most authentic sounding word in the entire aisle, sitting directly above the least authentic base in the store. This is where your 4th term lands, the one that ties the whole video together, standard of identity. For some foods, federal law writes a legal recipe. Tomato paste has one. It has to hit a specific concentration to be called paste. Tomato puree has one. Even ketchup has one. But salsa has no standard of identity at all. The law never defined it. So the word salsa, an Authentica stamped above it, is legally free. A company can print it over reconstituted paste and sugar and break no rule, because there's no rule to break. Compare peanut butter, which by law must be at least 90% peanuts. Salsa's legal minimum for real tomatoes is 0. That's not Trader Joe's being uniquely dishonest. Their list is actually short and clean looking. It's the whole category's secret, printed in the boldest irony. The jar that promises authentic stands on the exact loophole that makes the promise meaningless. The word did all the work. The paste did all the filling. Which leaves the one at the top. The name that sounds the most real, charges the most for it, and paid the most when someone finally read the fine print. Number 1, Frontera. The most authentic name in the American salsa aisle. Frontera is the celebrity chef line, built on the promise of real Mexican cooking. Fire-roasted, chef-crafted, the jar you buy when you've decided you're above the cheap stuff. it costs accordingly. So let the paper stack up, because this is where the costume becomes a full identity. First, the label. The good news is real. It opens with diced tomatoes and leans hard on fire roasted. The catch is what's blended into that base. Tomato paste sits in the ingredient line. Concentrate, same as every jar below it. And next to it, orange juice concentrate. Read that again. Orange juice concentrate in a salsa isn't for citrus, you'd notice. It's sweetness through a side door, so the label can dodge the plain word sugar. The most premium jar in the test reached for the same brightness Old El Paso did and found a classier way to spell it. And then there's the courtroom. The company behind Frontera's line was sued over labeling products all natural while they carried added ingredients, and listing sweetener as evaporated cane juice, the industry's polite costume for sugar. That case settled for almost $4 million. Not a taste test opinion, a federal class action, a signed settlement, a dollar figure. The most authentic-sounding brand in the aisle paid millions over the word natural. So why does Frontera outrank the Walmart jar that's just as full of concentrate? Because great value never lied to you. It charged $2 and admitted it was cheap. Frontera charged a premium, wrapped it in a chef's name and the word authentic, sweetened it through a loophole, and defended natural all the way to a settlement. The betrayal scales with the trust. The front throws the biggest party. The back files the same report it always does. So pause the countdown, because the real question isn't which jar. It's how. How does nearly every salsa in the store end up built from the same rebuilt paste as pasta sauce, while selling itself as the fresh one? Go back 100 years. Salsa was something you made in the time it took to chop it. Tomatoes, onions, chiles, a knife, a bowl. It didn't ship and it didn't keep because it was alive. You can't ship freshness in a warm jar. So the industry didn't ship freshness. It shipped the opposite and renamed it. Over 90% of America's processing tomatoes grow in one place, California's Central Valley, and they don't travel as tomatoes. They're boiled into paste, the cheapest, most storable form a tomato can take, held in drums all year. A jarring plant buys that paste by the barrel, adds water to rebuild it, cooks it hot enough to last a year on a shelf, spices it, and prints a name on the front. That's the base of the pasta sauce. That's also the base of the salsa. Same drum, same water, same cook. Two costumes at the end of one line. And the reason they can call it salsa at all is the loophole you already met. Tomato paste is legally defined. Salsa is not. So the product with real rules on it, the paste, becomes the honest skeleton, and the word with no rules, salsa, becomes the disguise you pay extra for. It's the same trick as the guacamole dip a court looked at in 2006. Under 2% avocado, legal only because the law never said guacamole had to contain much avocado. When there's no standard, the name is just marketing you're allowed to swallow. Here's the number that catches the whole thing red-handed. In 1991, salsa passed ketchup as America's #1 condiment. You've heard it 100 times, usually as proof of how fresh our tastes got. But it only passed in dollars, not in pounds. By weight, Americans still buy far more ketchup. Salsa didn't win because we eat more of it. It won because it costs more per ounce, more money for the same tomatoes, because the costume sells at a premium the ketchup bottle never could. Salsa won the receipt. Ketchup still wins the scale. Now let me take one wrong version of this anger away from you. You've probably seen a water test passed around as a way to check if your salsa is fresh. Drop it in water, watch it float or sink. Ignore it. That's the egg test, borrowed and slapped onto salsa by people who don't know the difference. There is no float test for a jar of salsa. The only real freshness tell is the one you can't shortcut, a bulging lid, a hiss, a sour smell, or the ingredient list itself. Don't outsource your judgment to a party trick. Outsource it to the first 2 words on the back. And the freshest tasting salsa you've ever had, the one at your favorite Mexican restaurant, is very often just canned tomatoes and a squeeze of paste. That restaurant flavor is a technique, not an ingredient. The difference between great salsa and sad salsa was never a secret farm. It was real tomatoes, a little acid, and the choice not to cook the life out of them. While the receipt's out, run the money, because here it stops being about taste. A premium jar like Frontera runs about 25 cents an ounce. Her day's Quesera. Real tomatoes, No paste, no sugar, which you'll meet in a second, runs closer to 18. The cleaner jar is the cheaper jar. Read that twice, because it kills the excuse the whole aisle runs on. Real tomatoes aren't expensive. Concentrate is expensive to make taste like anything, which is why it needs the sugar, the flavor packet, the chef's name on the front. You're not paying more for better tomatoes. You're paying more for a better costume. So what should you actually buy? 3 winners, judged by the exact same rule that just executed 10 losers. The first 2 words, and nothing added to fake the rest. Winner 3, Ortega salsa quesera. Read the whole list. It takes 4 seconds. Tomatoes, onions, green chili peppers, salt, cilantro. That's it. No puree, no concentrate leading the charge, no sugar, no natural flavor. It's cooked like the others, so it isn't fresh pico. But it's the only warm shelf jar in the test whose first ingredient is a tomato and whose last one you can still pronounce. Often the cheapest real jar on the shelf. Real was never the expensive option. Winner 2. Anything from the refrigerated aisle that reads like a cutting board. Garden Fresh Gourmet, the fresh store-made tubs that expire in a week. Flip them and you'll see diced tomatoes and tomato juice, not puree and paste, and a sugar line that says 0 because the sweetness is just ripe tomato. They cost more per ounce, and here the price is honest. You're paying for tomatoes that were never boiled into a drum. The cold aisle isn't a marketing zone. It's a different product. Winner 1 isn't a brand at all. It's a cutting board and 10 minutes. Chopped tomatoes, white onion, a jalapeno, and cilantro. Hit it with lime and salt, and you've made pico de gallo. Salsa with a 0-word ingredient list, because there's no label to hide behind. No concentrate, no hot fill, no standard of identity to exploit, because you are the standard. The winner isn't a better jar. It's the end of jars. 10 minutes of your knife, and nothing between you and the tomato. 3 tests before you go. No lab required. Test 1. The flip. Tonight, turn your jar around and read only the first 2 words. Tomato puree, crushed tomato concentrate, or anything followed by water. That's rebuilt paste, and you're holding sauce. Tomatoes, diced tomatoes, tomatillos. That's the real thing leading the list. One glance decides it. You'll never unknow this. Test 2. The sugar scan. Run your finger down the list for 3 words. Sugar, cane juice, natural flavor. Any of them means the recipe is painting over the base. A real salsa doesn't need brightness added back because it never cooked its own out. Not proof of harm, proof of a choice you can now see. Test 3. The cold aisle check. The truest salsa in any store lives in the refrigerated section and dies in a week. If a jar can sit on a warm shelf for a year, it was cooked to survive there. Hot fill, the same as sauce. That doesn't make it bad. It makes it not fresh, whatever the front says. 4 myths to leave on the shelf. Myth 1. Salsa is automatically the healthy dip. Calories, sure, it's light, but the sodium runs high and the sugar hides in the mild ones. It's the label that's healthy, not the word. Myth 2. Organic means real tomatoes. The big organic jars still open with organic tomato puree, water and organic paste. Organic concentrate is still concentrate. The flip test doesn't care about the word. Myth 3. Green salsa is healthier than red. It's just tomatillos instead of tomatoes, nearly the same nutrition. What decides healthy is sugar and sodium, not color. Myth 4. If it were really fake, it'd be illegal. It isn't fake, and that's the trap. It's legally salsa precisely because the law never said what salsa has to be. Nothing here is a crime. That's the whole problem. Here's the entire video in 5 seconds at the shelf. Flip the jar, read the first 2 words, and if it's puree, paste, or concentrate, you're holding sauce. Scan for sugar and natural flavor. And when the front brags loudest about being authentic, fresh, or real, that's exactly when you check the back. 5 seconds, once, and the aisle can't dress up in front of you again. So here's what you walked away with tonight. Concentrate. The first ingredient rule. Hot fill. Standard of identity. 4 terms, and every jar in that aisle just turned honest whether it wanted to or not. Most of these salsas are pasta sauce that learned to speak Spanish, built on the same rebuilt paste, cooked the same way, sold on a word the law never bothered to define. And the biggest premium sat on the most authentic-sounding name of them all, because the front throws the party. The back files the report. And now you can read it. Now it's your turn. Name the salsa in your kitchen in the comments, the brand, and the first ingredient exactly as it reads. I read every single one, and the brand you name most becomes the next label we pull. And send this to the person who swears their favorite jar is basically a salad. They're about to read 2 words that change the whole bowl. See you at the next test.